If you want to see a different kind of film study, check out my movie channel. I just posted a video talking about the movie Barbarian and why the twist works, so definitely make sure you check that out. The link is in the description below. And anyways, back to your regularly scheduled video. Well, all right, power rankings time. Season is over. Had to do a different kind of power rankings finale, so that's what we're doing here. Always one of my favorite things to do. Let's talk about where teams ended up, and I think very hilariously, and also what makes sense, but still very funny to me, is that, you see the list. If you've never seen this video before, just real quick, the way it works is using historical data of how much each position group typically gets you in terms of wins, depending on how good it is. I translate that into a win total for each position grouping based on, I use PFF grades for this. So, for example, the Bears offensive line is tier 2 according to PFF grades, and a tier 2 offensive line typically will get you about 1.72 wins, so I give them that. That's how this chart came to be. The tier is what you see on the bottom of the screen. If you don't get it now, you probably will get it by the time we get out of this video and we just start talking about it. But yeah, as I was saying, very funny. The Bears and Texans are the bottom two, and the Texans are 32, despite the fact that they won, giving the Bears the #1 overall pick. The Bears had a better offensive line, but not a ton great else. Although one thing worth noting is tier 5 quarterback play, but that's just throwing the football. That's all that they evaluate there. Fields has obviously been better than tier 5 because of his running ability, but that factors in the running game where they get 0.24 wins there. That kind of breaks the system sometimes. Like the Ravens are always off because of Lamar. That's kind of the one exception, and I don't know exactly what to do about that right now, but still, just kind of funny with those two. Cardinals obviously had a bad season. The Panthers, I was surprised to see this low, but it kind of makes some sense. Again, I thought they played good football the last couple months of the season. They were so bad at certain parts of the season. It makes sense that their overall grades are going to be tough, but they got some stuff in the defense that I think should be interesting, but as a whole, definitely have some room to improve. The Colts, another team where, the quarterback play, the receiving play, the running game was a mess in this one as well. They have some things to like. Their offensive line actually ended up being okay this year, even though it had a terrible start. The coverage was solid as well. Those are things that are not easy to get, and they got those, but the rest of the team just did not live up to the hype in this one. Giants are here hilariously, and I think they could win a playoff game. I'm not betting against them too much in that one. I have, my prediction was a 1-point loss, so I think that could happen. But yeah, you see why. Again, this is something that my grading system heavily favors: quarterback play, wide receiver play, and coverage. Those are the teams that historically do very well in today's NFL. The Giants are an exception, and I think they're just that. I think they're just an exception. That's my guess. Giants fans are obviously going to be upset. I get it. Listen, I would be upset if I was a Giants fan. Sure, that makes, you'd be a bad fan if you're not upset about this, I think. But, that's not true. There's different kinds of fans, but you know what I'm saying. Daniel Jones has been solid this year. He's actually been, according to this grading system, the most valuable piece of the Giants team. I don't disagree. But the receiving core has played not great, and the defense hasn't just not graded out overly well. I'd probably have their defense a little bit better than the PFF graders do, so I think they're not quite 27th on my personal list, but I can see why they're here. The Rams are at 26. Again, some things they did nicely this season on defense. Really, the run defense was the main thing. The receiving core ended up being okay, which was interesting enough, but they were so injured. They might have actually been all right this year. Not good, but like maybe mediocre had Stafford and Cooper Kupp stayed healthy, but that didn't happen. So by the time they figured out some other stuff, it was kind of too little too late. The Jaguars are also here at 25, which is surprising. I would have thought that they were better than this, but they are well coached. And again, still 7.48 total wins, and they ended up with 9 wins. So it's not like a massive difference from total wins to actual wins. Feels like more so there's just a bunch of teams clumped up there, and they ended up being just slightly below some of these other teams. So that's worth noting. And again, when you factor on, like, the receiving core was tier 4, but I think Doug Peterson's schemes guys open well enough that it actually makes it more valuable than just that. This does not factor in coaching. So I actually don't, that could be another win right there, and that would put you up to basically they're performing where they should be performing. So to me, that doesn't make zero sense. All right, next 8 here, the Raiders, disappointing year for the Raiders. Quarterback play being tier 3, you'd have hoped would have been better heading into the season. Receiving play was still very good, but the defense was just a mess. And, when you don't have the amazing quarterback play or amazing receiving play, you need the defense to at least play solid if you're going to get into the playoffs. It did not, so they did not. The Titans, who nearly made the playoffs as well, again, some nice things. They covered well. Again, tier 3 quarterback play, but it wasn't tier 3 towards the end of the season because Tannehill got hurt. Run defense was solid, but too many holes. Offensive line was a mess this year, and the receiving core wasn't great either. The Balls are here. That is the Washington football team who had, good coverage unit. That's kind of the main thing that got them through this season. Quarterback play was tier 5. I know people love Taylor Heineke. His PFF hated him. PFF had him as one of the worst quarterbacks in the league. So I kind of understood why they went with the Wentz move, albeit it completely blew up in their face and Wentz looked terrible. So I understood the move. It just, it really did not work out and probably still wasn't the right move in hindsight, especially knowing what we know now about Carson Wentz. But quarterback play needs to be better if this team is going to have a chance. There's a good thing and a bad thing about being a quarterback away, right? The Lions are here at 21, so they kind of punched above the weight class a little bit. Although not really. I mean, they ended up with 9 wins. Their projected total, how they played, would be 8 wins. So again, another team that's right around where they were projected to be. A lot of these teams, in fact, ended up there, which is interesting to me. But maybe the algorithm knows something. The, receiving core was awesome this year. Tier 1 receiving core. That's what got them through this season. Goff played pretty well, and the offensive line played well. So, definitely an offensive team, but they got to work on their defense if they're going to make the playoffs next year. The Ravens are, according to this, they're not quite as good as, a playoff team as you expect from a playoff team. But again, the injuries definitely hurt it. I've already talked about how Lamar kind of breaks the system a little bit, and the Ravens are always a little bit lower than they should be. So this actually makes sense to me. They'd be a couple wins lower with like a tier 4 quarterback grade, but I would imagine it'd be higher if you factored in Lamar's running ability when he was healthy. The Broncos at 19 are a real surprise to me, and it kind of makes some sense, I think, just because, again, their tier 1 coverage grade usually is just such value to a football team that usually just helps you so much. The issue is that Denver just had absolutely nothing. And again, you go back and you think about how many games that Denver lost, like 17-16. If this team scored 20 points every single game, they'd be easily in the playoffs. So kind of a weird team, but they underperformed expectations according to this. You could chalk that up to coaching, luck, or maybe maybe you could chalk it up to a fault in the algorithm, which, how dare you? This is faultless. No, okay. Of course, there are issues with the algorithm as well, so maybe there's something there too. Who knows? Number 18, the Falcons performed pretty well on this, with a good offensive line and tier 2 receiving core, and then just some various other, wins across the board. Running game was good. Run defense was good. Coverage was, you got something there. Also, I didn't mention at the beginning, but I gave every team the kicking. I couldn't find team kicking percentage this season. I don't know what it was, so I had to just divide it up evenly, so that's why I did that there. But the Falcons, according to this, were a little bit better than their record would indicate, and then the Seahawks are a team here as well, as they had ended up being tier 3 quarterback play. Geno Smith was so hot to start the season, definitely cooled off, but receiving core is very good, and coverage was solid this year, so that's kind of why they're at 9.15 wins, and again, they won 9 games, so they're right where they should be at. Next, 8, we still do have a few non-playoff teams that made it to this 8. We have the Browns, who were not a playoff team, but again, you can see why with tier 3 quarterback play, tier 3 coverage unit, tier 3 receiving unit, tier 2 offensive line. A lot of decent stuff. They did have the tier 1 running game. That's kind of another thing as well. So they were kind of solid across the board and just were not able to win enough games. Part of me does wonder if Brissett stays out there, does the team have a chance of making the playoffs? I get why they didn't put him out there. It just, makes me wonder because obviously Watson was expectedly rusty when he came out. I don't know. The Buccaneers at 15, the future Super Bowl champions. I'm not going to let you talk me out of it. The Buccaneers here at 15 with, ended up being good Tom Brady. He had a rough stretch kind of in the middle of the season, but definitely picked it up with that Panthers game where he was fantastic. Ends up being tier 2 quarterback play, and that's definitely been the heavy lifting. That and the coverage unit, which has been very good as well. This team cannot rush the passer. That's been tough, and the run defense hasn't been overly great, although has picked it up these past few weeks. Again, receiving core was disappointing, just tier 3. When they won a Super Bowl, it was with the strength of their receiving core, and obviously that Tom Brady guy that helped, not being able to have really as dominant of a receiving core these past couple of years, the past 2 years have been kind of disappointing, even though they have big names. The Jets are a team where, the coverage unit is obviously why they're so high up, but it does kind of seem to be a trend a little bit of if you're a team that has this great coverage unit, but then doesn't have a great offense, you tend to underperform a little bit from where you're expected to perform. The Jets with tier 5 offensive line, quarterback play, actually okay receiving core this year, but then the running game ended up not giving them any wins either. Obviously injuries affected that. With an ineffective offense, they were unable to perform as well as they should have, being a 9.5 win team. The Patriots, another team that underperformed, and not massively, but still, again, they're within 2 wins. Usually that's where this algorithm tends to get you, is within a couple wins, which is where they're at. But still, coverage unit is, was solid this year. Wasn't quite as good as it was early on in the year, but defense was fine. Everything was fine, right? You look across the board, there's nothing really that great or bad one way or the other, so that's why they ended up as a mediocre football team. The Steelers were a fun watch in 2022 with the, Kenny Pickett, I thought was really good as a rookie. He ends up, him and Trubisky get the tier 2 quarterback wins. That's definitely pretty good. The rest of the team wasn't spectacular except for the run defense, which was very good. Pass rush was not as good as we expected to be because TJ Watt was, hurt and then took some time to really become TJ Watt again. I thought his overall numbers weren't great this year, but that's just because he was hurt and he came back and, maybe wasn't fully healthy when he came back, but still made a difference. He makes a difference just when he's on the football field. He draws double teams, but they didn't have a guy who draws double teams and then still gets to the quarterback, even with, 2 guys on him, the way TJ Watt usually does. So, that being said, it's still a good team. I mean, the grading system said that they should have won 10 games this year. As it turned out, they end up, not winning 10, but they win 9. So they came pretty close and nearly had a playoff berth. A fun team. Looking forward to seeing what they do in the future. Chargers are here again, playoff team here at 11. A team that's definitely here with the strength of Justin Herbert, the receiving core, and also coverage unit has all of a sudden started playing really well the second half of the season for the Chargers, and they're kind of a testament to if you throw the football well and you defend the pass well, you're going to get to the playoffs and you can do some nice things. Now, I worry about their matchup against Jacksonville, but still, it is just worth noting that I'm fascinated in seeing where this team can go, as those are kind of the 3 main categories you want to be good in. And typically, if you're tier 2 or better in all of those categories, you perform very, very well. They are tier 2 in all of those categories, so we'll see what they do because, again, a lot of tier 5s on that list as well. Just kind of a fascinating case study. I know they're an analytically inclined team, so makes sense that they built their team that way. We'll see what they do. The Saints are here at 10. PFF loves Andy Dalton. They have Andy Dalton as a tier 1 quarterback. I don't know what's going on there. I don't agree with that. So I think that's the reason why they're there. I use PFF grades, so I can, kind of remove myself from the equation a little bit. It's not just my own opinions on it. It's, someone else's. But, I don't know. I would not have Andy Dalton there. I respect PFF. I respect what they do. Every now and then they have one of those grades. I'm like, what are we doing here? That's it with Andy Dalton. But as a whole, again, I still am a fan of them. But number 9, with the Packers, who, their coverage unit ended up being a real surprise. And it checks out. Late down the stretch, it really started performing much better. And I think that was a big key for why the Packers started winning games late in the season. Everyone talks about the receiving core. The receiving core still didn't end up being great this year. Tier 4, definitely Christian Watson helped a lot with that, just to add the extra piece they needed to make the offense work. But it's really the defense stepping it up as of late. Rodgers was good all year. The offensive line was pretty good all year, and the running game was good all year. But the coverage getting better allowed them to make that run, and they could have easily made the playoffs had they just won that last game. All right, top 8 on this list, we have all playoff teams, which is good. One thing I would like to mention is last year, two teams that performed a lot higher on the list than people were expecting were the Rams and the Bengals, the two teams that made the Super Bowl. What happened this year? I don't know, but you have the Cowboys at 8, who are a team where it's not really on the strength of any one particular category. They just have a lot of tier 2s and tier 3s across the board. Prescott's been solid, the receiving core's been solid, the offensive line's been good, the run defense has been solid, the coverage unit's been solid, and the pass rush has been the one tier 1 on this list. That's kind of been the strength of this team. So again, having that many, 1.5 win categories gets you here, but probably won't get you to the top of the list. But we'll see. Maybe if Dak Prescott gets hot, that might be what they need to get to the Super Bowl. The number 7, the Buffalo Bills with Josh Allen as a tier 1 quarterback. That checks out. You also have the coverage units played very well, and the tier 3 receiving core. Still would love another kind of a true number 2 receiver for Buffalo. That's something maybe they could work on in the offseason, but they're still doing all right. Offensive line has not graded out overly well. That's a bit of a concern, but other than that, tier 1 running game on top of this, so they're an 11-win team according to this. They, of course, ended the season with 13 wins, so there you go. Meanwhile, at number 6, the Bengals, who, won 12 games. Their projected total was 11.79, so that's pretty much on the money. Joe Burrow, tier 1 quarterback play, tier 2 receiving play. They got some injuries throughout the season. I bet it would be tier 1 had they stayed healthy all year. The coverage unit, tier 2 as well. So again, doing very well in those 3 big categories. That'll definitely get you there. And again, run defense also got you some wins there. Still don't love the offensive line, but that team will win you a good chunk of games. The Dolphins are interesting here. 12 wins felt like what they were going to coast to for most of this season. But one notable thing is with the tier 1 quarterback grade, that obviously was not tier 1 throughout the season. Tua did not play every single game, and when he was not out there, it was, tier 5 quarterback play. And so that's probably the biggest reason why they have a big disparity. And, if you knock them down and to tier 5, that puts them at an 8-win team. I mean, that's not a bad team necessarily, but definitely not a great team either. Receiving core has been awesome. Run defense has been awesome. And pass rush has been awesome for this Dolphins team. But none of it matters if you can't get at least decent quarterback play. So while they're the 5th team on this list, I would not say that they're the 5th best team heading into the playoffs. Number 4, the Minnesota Vikings, who have Kirk Cousins as a tier 2 quarterback. You have a tier 1 receiving core with obviously Justin Jefferson, and that's the main reason why they're so high. Is again, those 2 categories are really important. Now, worth noting, offensive line graded very well, but they have some injuries now, which is definitely concerning, as it's probably not a tier 2 offensive line right now. It might be like a tier 4 offensive line, especially the O'Neal injury really hurts them. And I think it's also fair to note that, this might be a flaw in the algorithm a little bit of their coverage is tier 3, but one of the issues is that Peterson's played very well, but kind of the other secondary guys haven't played. There's been other holes in the secondary, and secondary is such a weak link sport that maybe, while they're tier 3 in terms of overall grades, because that's just all mixed together, maybe the actual value of their coverage unit is less than tier 3, which means that they probably wouldn't be quite as good there. But still, this has them as a 12.5 win football team, and they ended up winning 13 games. So they're right around where they should be. The Eagles are another team that won 14 games. They're projected for 14.69 with the tier 1 coverage unit, tier 2 quarterback play. I have to think Minshew's play dropped that down to tier 2. Also, the receiving core being tier 2, tier 1 offensive line, tier 1 pass rush, really good run defense as well. This is a really good football team. There's no denying it. There's a reason why these top 3 teams have, there's a jump there. These 3 teams are loaded in pretty much every category. The 49ers are at number 2, so they're projected for 15.31 wins. They only won 13, but again, first off, that's just a little over 2 off, so it's not that crazy. But also, I think the 49ers kind of stumbled a little bit early on too, but then really found their groove. Tier 3 quarterback play, but everything else has been amazing. Tier 1 offensive line, tier 1 wide receiver play, tier 1 run defense, tier 1 coverage unit, and tier 1 pass rush. This is a team that is absolutely loaded in every single category. The only thing they're not tier 1 in is quarterback play and running game, but the running game is still probably tier 1 because you get the Kyle Shanahan scheme. So The real only question with the 49ers is Brock Purdy, and is this guy going to eventually turn into a lemon? I don't think so, because the guy's playing fantastic at football as of right now. So this is a really exciting team, but they are not number one on the power rankings. The Chiefs just narrowly edged them out because the quarterback play still matters so much, and they have a tier 1 quarterback. Not just that, but the tier 1 wide receiving play and coverage unit. Again, I talked about if you could do well in those 3 categories, those teams historically perform very well. In fact, if you finish, the stat is if you finish top 7 according to PFF grades in those 3 categories, you make the Super Bowl or you lose to a team that made the Super Bowl. Like, that's pretty much what happens there. The Chiefs are one of those teams, so we'll see if they can do it. Now, again, you could argue, are they really a tier 1 coverage unit? I don't know, but PFF has them there. And again, tier 1 offensive line on top of it, tier 3 run defense, tier 3 pass rush. But it's really the big 3 categories is what gets them there. Who knows? We could see a Chiefs-Niners Super Bowl rematch from just a couple years ago. That would be fun. But yeah, those are the power rankings. What do you guys think of them? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from you. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.